All right, if you're in a management role, you live this balancing act every single day. On one hand, your people are absolutely your greatest asset. But on the other, their wages are one of your biggest, if not the biggest, line item on your budget. Get that balance wrong, and you are in a world of hurt. So today, we're going deep. We're diving into the core mechanics of how wages are actually determined. And look, this isn't just some abstract textbook stuff. This is about understanding the fundamental economic forces that really dictate your company's ability to survive, to profit, and to get and keep the best people.
So let's just cut right to the chase. How is a wage really decided? I mean, is it just a back-and-forth negotiation? Is it dictated by some invisible hand of the market? Or is it all just about what the law says? Well, the truth is, it's a messy, fascinating mix of all of the above. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain and show you exactly how all those pieces fit together. Okay, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll start with the pure theory, the free market price. Then, we're going to throw a wrench in the works and install what's called a wage floor. After that, we'll look at how that one single rule plays out in two totally different scenarios. And finally, we'll bring it all home with a real-world case study to see how these forces create what we call the dual market dilemma. All right, first things first. We have to start with the foundation, the pure theoretical free market. So imagine a world with zero government intervention. In this world, wages would be set by one thing and one thing only, the simple, elegant dance between labor supply and labor demand.
And that perfect point where those two forces meet, that's what we economists call market equilibrium. Think of it as the Goldilocks price for labor. It's the wage that's not too high, not too low, but just right to get the exact number of workers that businesses are looking to hire. There's no one left over and no jobs left unfilled. The market just clears. Now, of course, this is a perfect model, but it's the baseline you absolutely have to grasp to understand everything else that comes next.
And this slide gives us two perfect real-world examples of how the market tries to find that equilibrium. On the left, you've got a labor shortage. There just aren't enough top-tier chefs to go around. So what happens? It turns into a bidding war. Resorts and restaurants have to keep upping their offers to lure talent away from their competitors, and wages just climb and climb. But now, look at the right. A labor surplus. You have tons of applicants for unskilled cleaning jobs. Well, here the power dynamic completely flips. The employers have the leverage, and that huge supply of available labor naturally pushes the wage down until it settles at that market equilibrium point.
Okay, so that's the ideal world, right? But we all know we don't live in a perfectly free market. So now let's move to the next level and see what happens when the government steps in and installs a wage floor. This is a sentence you should probably write down. I mean it. As a manager, you have to burn this into your brain. The free market is a fantastic model for thinking, but it's not the reality you operate in. The real world is a complex web of laws, regulations, and rules, and understanding those constraints is what separates a good manager from a great one.
And the most common form of this intervention, of course, is the minimum wage. In economic terms, we call this a price floor. Think of it like this. The government draws a hard line in the sand and says, no matter what, you cannot pay someone less than this amount per hour. The price of labor, the wage, is legally forbidden from falling below that level, regardless of what supply and demand might be screaming for.
So we've got this one single rule, the minimum wage. But here's the million-dollar question. Does it affect all of your employees the same way? Not even close. Let's really analyze its impact by looking at two very, very different kinds of workers.
Now this table, this really gets to the core of it all. Just look at the dishwasher. The market says their labor is worth about 1.5 million rupiah. But the law, the minimum wage, says you have to pay 2.5 million. In this case, the law is binding. It's actively forcing the wage up by a full million rupiah. Now flip that completely on its head and look at the chef. The market values their skills at a whopping 10 million rupiah. The 2.5 million minimum wage? It's a joke. It's completely totally irrelevant. The market has already set their price 4 times higher. Let's break down why this difference is so incredibly important.
So let's zoom in on scenario A, the dishwasher. We have a government-mandated price of 2.5 million, which is sitting way above what the natural free market wage of 1.5 million would have been.
And right there, that's the problem you're now facing as a manager. At that artificially high wage of 2.5 million, you just can't afford to hire as many dishwashers as you could have at 1.5. So your demand for them goes down. At the same time, that higher wage looks pretty good, so more people apply for the job and the labor supply goes up. And that gap between the few jobs you're offering and the many people who want them, that, my friends, is the classic economic definition of unemployment created by a price floor.
Now let's jump over to scenario B and see how different it is for the chef. Here, the market is willing to pay 10 million rupiah. That minimum wage of 2.5 million isn't just below it, it's not even in the same zip code. It's so low, it's a complete non-factor.
And here is the absolute bottom line for you as a manager. When it comes to your highly skilled, in-demand employees, the minimum wage is background noise. It's basically irrelevant. Your real battle isn't with government regulations, it's fought in the open market against your competitors for that scarce talent. For those key roles, supply and demand are the only things that truly matter.
Okay, so we've seen the theory, we've seen the two distinct scenarios. Now let's see what happens when these powerful forces all collide in a real place. This brings us to the fascinating, complex reality of a tourism hotspot like Tanjung Lesung.
Just look at these numbers for a second. In the formal sector, we're talking the big resorts that play by all the rules, the wages are between 3.5 and 4 million rupiah. Literally right next door, in the informal sector, your local food stalls, your warungs, the pay is between 1.8 and 2.5 million. That is a massive gap. At the low end, you're talking about nearly double the pay, just for working in a different building. And this slide explains exactly how that happens. The formal sector, they have to comply. They pay the official minimum wage. And as we just saw, that high binding wage can price some people out of a job. But those people don't just disappear. They flow into the informal sector, which operates much closer to that true lower market equilibrium wage. You could almost say the informal sector acts like a safety valve, absorbing all the surplus labor that the formal sector can't afford to hire.
So why on earth does this matter to you? Because it means that the market rate for labor isn't one simple number. You're actually operating in an environment with two completely different economies that exist side by side. Your entire strategy for hiring, for compensation, for everything, has to account for the fact that your competitor down the street might be playing by a totally different set of financial rules.
And that leaves us with one last, very practical and very tough question. As a leader, how do you do it? How do you build a real, sustainable staffing strategy when you're caught between these two competing wage structures? How do you manage your costs, follow the law, and still get the people you need when the official economy and the real economy don't line up? That's not a textbook question. That is a real-world leadership challenge.